Hi everyone, so today we're going to be going over the fundraising numbers from the first 24 hours of some key campaigns, including the former Vice President Joe Biden's campaign, California Senator Kamala Harris's campaign, former Texas Congressman Beto O'Rourke's campaign, and Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders' campaign. So these numbers are from the first 24 hours of each of these different candidates who have announced. So obviously we'll be going through these candidates in alphabetical order and then doing a recap table at the end with all of the figures. So starting off with Joe Biden. So this is Joe Biden's figures. So this is the layout we'll be using. Joe Biden has a pinkish color, given that he's the most conservative candidate in the race. Beto O'Rourke has a yellowish color, since he's the second most conservative. Kamala Harris with a greenish color, since she's the third most conservative. And then Bernie Sanders, being the least conservative, has the blue color. Obviously, this is just between these candidates, not the whole field, because then things might shape up very differently. But out of these candidates, I think we can agree it's pretty straightforward. Joe Biden, the most conservative, followed by Beto O'Rourke, Kamala Harris, and Bernie Sanders. So, Joe Biden raising a whopping $6.3 million. Very impressive stuff for the former vice president. He got that money from 99,000 individual donors with an average donation amount of $65 apiece. So a lot of things to unpack here. Firstly, very good for Joe Biden that he has so much money that he was able to raise in that first 24 hours. 6.3 million, definitely something to note. He will be a formidable competitor against some of these other other declared, obviously. All the main candidates have now declared against some of these other candidates. However, there's if I was Joe Biden, I overall would be quite happy with this. I would be very thankful for the massive haul that was brought in, but there is two areas of concern if I'm Joe Biden. I'm looking at the amount of individual donors and the average donation amount. So as for the individual donors, as you'll see in some other, when we go through the other candidate slides, that's not all that much individual donors compared to some of the other candidates. You're not cracking 100,000 donors. That's not great news for your presidential campaign. The average donation being $65 a piece. That to me communicates that your base is older, that your base is more wealthy, and your base is whiter. That's what that communicates to me, and that's not necessarily surprising. That's backed up with polling, where Joe Biden doing quite well with older folks who generally have more money than younger folks and more money to spend on their presidential candidates. So, and there's just not as many of them. But here's the thing: when it comes to voting, if you're rich or if you're poor, you still get one vote, the same, right? And so having large average donations amount is good for spending it on campaign ads, but it won't do you much at the voting booth with those people. I mean, yes, regardless, you're going to get more people to your campaign with those campaign ads, so it is good to have money in the war chest, but I think it's better if you have slightly less money but a lot more people who are guaranteed to show up at the polling place. Because if you're giving money to that candidate, you're gonna intend to vote for them. And okay, so done with Joe Biden. Overall, I would say it's good, quite good, given how much money he's raised. But again, I just don't think that his average donation amount is good enough. So, the next person on this list is California Senator Kamala Harris. So she raised $1.5 million for her White House bid with 38,000 individual donors for an average donation amount of $39 apiece. So here's the thing with Kamala Harris. When she announced in her first 24 hours that she raised $1.5 million, everyone was absolutely shocked. Very impressed that she was able to raise all that money just within the first 24 hours. But then people people like Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, Beto O'Rourke, they've set the bar but much higher than 1.5 million, as you will see, and that's just uncompetitive right now. You're not going to have enough money to spend on advertisements, to spend on organizing in these early states and around the country. Um, However, let's get to some of the one piece of good news. Her average donation amount is quite good, so you want to have a low average donation amount. Whereas Joe Biden's is $65, whereas Kamala Harris is $39. But overall, I would say not great first 24-hour fundraising for Kamala. Did not raise nearly as much money as as Biden, Bernie, Beto, as you will see, and her individual donor list is not as extensive. So overall for Kamala Harris, not great news for her. So far, each of the candidates have had what kind of at least one good point. For Joe Biden, it was how much money he raised, and for Kamala Harris, it's her average donation. But again, I just don't think that Kamala Harris could be competitive in the money race, given how far behind she is in the amount of money raised. So, next up on the list, we have former Texas Congressman Beto O'Rourke. So, Beto O'Rourke, in his first 24 hours, he raised $6.1 million in his first 24 hours, his first day of fundraising. That came from 128,000 individual donors. That if you do the math and divide it, that gives you an average donation of $48 a piece. So, okay, so let's unpack all of this. Beto O'Rourke, firstly, very good job on the amount of dollars, on the amount of money raised. 6.1 million. That's a lot of money, more than some of these other candidates have been able to raise. 128,000 individual donors. I would say that's pretty good. Not great, but pretty good, in the top two in terms of that right now. And then the average donation of $48. That's the alarm point for Beto O'Rourke. He should be looking at that and saying, I can't keep having my base being people who have a bit more money to spend, because they're not going to be, they're more likely to turn up at the polling place. But those people, like, how do I put this? If you have more donations from, if you have people giving less but more of those people, and it translates to be about the same, I would say that's better than having less amount of people contribute more, given that at the end of the day it's one person, one vote, and that's pretty much it. So, Beto O'Rourke, great news on the amount of money raised. I would say individual donors is also relatively good, but that average donation, I think, is a warning sign for the candidates. So, finally, the Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders fundraising. So, Bernie Sanders slightly behind Joe Biden and Beto O'Rourke in terms of the amount of money raised. $5.9 million raised. However, here's the big thing. 225,000 people gave to him, and what that tells me, and with an average donation of $27, or maybe I thought it was, I think it's actually $26. No, I think it's $27. Anyway, $26 or $27. What that tells me is that Bernie Sanders has a bigger base contributing less. And in the long run, I think that's a more sustainable way, because these people, A, they're more likely to come back and contribute more later, and B, it's one person, one vote. And so if you have a bigger base, that's more likely to get you votes in the states, which transfer to delegates, which transfers you to winning the Democratic nominations. So Bernie Sanders, I would say, good news on the individual donors and the average donation, but he's slightly behind in the amount of money raised, but not far behind. So overall, I would say Bernie Sanders is the big winner coming out of these fundraising days. So just to recap everything, for Joe Biden, $6.3 million raised with 999,000 individual donors with an average donation of $65.
So, next up is California Senator Kamala Harris, $1.5 million raised with 38,000 individual donors, which comes to, if you do the math, $39 a piece. Beto O'Rourke with $6.1 million raised from 128,000 individual donors, that gives us an average contribution of $48. And Bernie Sanders $5.9 million from 225,000 individual donors with an average donation of $27 a piece. So that's it for today's video, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and comment, and I'll see you all in the next video. Cheers. Fun election prediction.